welcome everyone to another broadcast of the Judge Hubert Radio Hour on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. And now your host, judge and author, the Honorable Judge Hubert.
Good evening, and thank you, Scott. We appreciate it. Looking forward to having an opportunity to share some information tonight. And of course, as always, as most of you know out there, our goal every time we're here on the air is to provide you, my listening audience, and all those out there in radio land, with the either what we might refer to as what this show seeks to emphasize is excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm having a little moment there. We're going to be talking today, of course, about some of the social justice issues going on. We're going to hit on some of the electoral things that have happened, particularly in the last 24 hours here in the States. And of course, we always touch on something about education because, the motto we run with is education is the key to being and staying free. So I hope each of you out there with us can hear us clearly and that we'll pick up on something. I always remind our guests of the words of my mentor, Dr. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm having a little water moment here. Matt King Carter always talks about the never go to bed as ignorant as you were when you got up this morning. Every day you ought to learn something new. And so today we're going to share some insights, general discussion here with a very good friend of mine who has a lot of insight into the electoral process that we've just seen completed or nearly completed here in the States. And we do hope that you all will pick up some information that will be helpful as we do this, because indeed it's been a showstopper. And of course, some unexpected things have happened along the way, but we're going to do our best to try to make sense out of the things that have happened, if that's even possible. So tonight I bring to you Mr. Mario Davis. Mr. Davis is a native of DeLand, Florida, which is the county seat of Volusia County. He's a multifaceted businessman, including political consultant. And of course, he can offer some insights on what we have just seen happen here in our country. We might best call this thing, as we say, an opportunity for us to all learn, because indeed there were things that happened that certainly blew our minds. And I'm sure many of you out there are wondering what happened. And we're going to just talk about a little bit of that tonight as we journey together. So welcome to the call, Mr. Davis.
Judge Grimes, I definitely appreciate the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you about any topic.
Well, our conversations are often any topic, so pretty broad there. But before we dive into our topic for tonight, let's give our listening audience a little insight into your growing up and how you got to where you are today. So fill us in on a little bit of your background.
Well, Judge, as you know, as you indicated, I grew up in DeLand, from Volusia County. My father's from Daytona Beach, so I had an opportunity to live on both sides of the county and pierced at what we call the Palmetto Curtain. Attended Florida Memorial University, where I majored in actually English and pre-law. I could not pass the bar as you did, but what I was able to do was become an accountant. I right now own a successful, reasonably successful, we're riddled with debt, but we have a accounting firm in Daytona Beach where we specialize in taxes, payroll, bookkeeping, forensic audits, CPA certifications. In addition to that, as you indicated, I work with several political figures, many of our African-American elected officials in Volusia County. I've contributed to their campaigns as well as others. So definitely a pleasure. Life has been great, and I have no complaints, even today.
All right. And, of course, you're married to the wonderful
Thank you,
Commissioner.
Judge. Thank you, Judge. I'm married to Commissioner Jessica Davis over in DeLand. She's the first African American female elected. She is listening to us right now, so I thank you, Judge. And we have one daughter, 12-year-old Marissa, who's going on 35.
Well, we know that she will help guide you and keep you on your toes, both mama and daughter. So just glad to have you, my friend. This, of course, is we've just come up to election season, and you and I have talked about a lot of different aspects of this election. And you actually were involved with several of the candidates, as you have been for the last several years, that you have become a pretty proficient one that is able to what we call political consultant. So we want to talk about that for a minute. What are some of the other, prior to getting into the dates, what are some of the other candidates that you've been successful with, helping them to navigate the electoral process to get to where they wanted to be?
Oh, so many, Judge. I initially started with my godmother mentor, Joyce Cusack. At the time, she was running for re-election for the state House representative seat in Volusia County. At that time, she was the Speaker Pro Tem in the Florida House of Representatives. She kind of got me engaged in politics through my church, Greater Union First Baptist Church. After that, my next campaign was, of course, my beautiful wife, Jessica Davis, where we were able to secure her victory at 72% that particular time. And then it's numerous campaigns. Commissioner Paula Reed in Daytona Beach, school board member Ida Wright, Judge Joan Anthony, Judge Kathleen McNeely, Mayor Derrick Henry, several individuals that we've been able to work with. And over the years, I've morphed into more so working from the leadership level of campaigns. I worked for the Biden campaign as far as making sure Volusia County and surrounding counties had representation. Mayor Tell Hill in Palatka, we did some work with him as well. Then we moved into a lot of the organizations after campaigns. I'm the executive director for the Minority Elected Official organization, which is comprised of all the minority elected officials throughout Volusia, St. Johns, Putnam, and Flagler counties. But also, in addition to that, I serve as the chair of the board for Equal Ground. I've also served as the regional director for Equal Ground, as well as the Volusia County coordinator for Equal Ground. In addition to that, I've worked with Ford, Florida, Florida Democratic Party, Volusia Democratic Party. So several entities, several political realms.
All right. And in fact, some of the names that you called out have been guests on our show here. So, congratulations. You've been very successful, and I'm sure you'll be getting ready for the next session, which here in Florida, of course, is in 2 years. The 26th, because we've got a gubernatorial election coming up. And, of course, there are a number of other seats and probably referendums that will be a part of the 2026 election. Well, why don't we dive in? Let's talk about some of the things about this current election that we've just seen happen. And I know I was up late last night, and then I had a early morning appointment, so I was pretty drained, like so many other people, because what we thought maybe could happen did not happen. And I'm talking about the election of Kamala Harris as the President of the United States. And so what is your understanding of where we were and how did that all unfold? And of course, we know that former President Trump had a lot of baggage with him, but nevertheless, he was successful, excuse me, in being able to conquer that baggage or pack that baggage away, and of course, ultimately won the election. I believe the number was 280. I believe it was 286 to 220, but I think there's still about 3 states that are have not yet finished all of their ballots and certification countings. So what's your opinion on that, Mr. Davis?
You know, Judge, I think the lesson we learned from last night was that we can't assume what's going to happen in any political election. And although we've seen loss and defeat before, I don't think the United States has ever encountered the level of defeat that took place last night, nor do I feel the citizens of the United States understand the impact of last night's election. Every election season, we always hear the phrase, this is the most important election of your lifetime. Mm-hmm. In fact, last night was the most important election of everyone alive in the United States today and the world from a lifetime perspective. And I say that initially because the impact of this election is phenomenal. And what we are now faced with is so many uncertainties that we've never had before in a presidential outcome. Even as it relates to what it's going to require to successfully complete this 4-year term, the people who are elected to office have no idea what that looks like. And we're faced with a president or an individual who's now coming into office facing several criminal charges, criminal convictions, pending charges. In addition to that, an array of issues that typically you would not see from an individual running for president of the United States. With that being said, I think yesterday was also a learning lesson as it relates to individuals who took for granted the ability to vote and did not. A group of individuals who decided to vote one way based off information they received from the media, as opposed to information they should have done research on for themselves and their families. And as a result, I think we're now faced with a nation of people who are confused, a nation of people who don't have the ability to understand or comprehend what it's going to take to successfully move forward and also identify with the individual that was elected. But then in addition to that, I think that the biggest challenge we have is how does the nation mend together and become as one so that we can deal with the challenges globally, but also the massive challenges we have as a nation.
Okay. Well, you know, let's dive a little deeper in that, because indeed there were a lot of disappointed people last night. When you look at the size of her rallies, her speaking engagements, the number of those that she was doing in one day, oftentimes 3 or 4 rallies with large crowds who were very energized. When there were people that were, I guess you can say, first of all, she got into the campaign late. We all know that President Biden dropped out and endorsed her back on July 21st. So that left with really about, a little over 3 months to be able to campaign. And it seems like she was everywhere, constant and continual. But it was, there's so many people that it appears, which is, I guess, the shocker for me is that they could not, and she could not overcome the Trump effect. Now, here's a man that has been found guilty of 34 felony counts. He's currently has at least 3 other cases that are pending, one of which was a federal case that was dismissed down in Fort St. Lucie, Fort Pierce area, which was the document case. It was literally those. And for those who may not be familiar with that, he had took a number of boxes of highly sensitive classified documents with him when he left the presidency. And we all know that he left the presidency under some really, I'm almost not sure what word to use, precarious. It was, many of you will remember the January 6th movement, where he, of course, indicated that he had the election had been stolen from him. He began that making those claims even before the election was over, approximately about 3 months before, that if anybody tried to beat him, the only way they could do it would be if the election was stolen. And so we know that that became his calling card, and that became his effort to turn the country over to a group of, I'm not even sure what we should call them, hooligans, who of course invaded the Capitol at the time that they were, the House and Senate were engaged in certifying the election. And of course we know that he claimed that he didn't tell the people to do so, but there's been so much video footage of his speech from the ellipse, basically telling people to go up to the area. He had invited them to Washington, telling them to go up there. And of course, we know that there was a lot of drama. There was a lot of efforts. And of course, we know that many people ended up getting hurt. I believe there was at least 2 that were killed. Later, another one committed suicide from all of the pain and suffering that he had. And we know that ultimately there were over 1,000 people that were charged with violating the official proceedings and, of course, trespass of the Capitol. And, of course, all of that, and Trump ended up having 4 or 5 different criminal charges brought against him. He was, as we know, he was convicted, 34 felonies in New York. We're still waiting for the sentencing for that to take place about a week before Thanksgiving. But we know that is, in spite of that, and I'm sure, and much more, he was actually able to get the people to forget about that and to hold on to the fact that he had been victimized by the system, as he said. So, but here's where we are. And yet, again, I say, he overcame the Trump effect. Any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think, Judge, one of the things about you and your many years of experience, you're a lot humbler than I am, and you tend to deliver information in a way that's much more receptive to the audience. I'm a little bit more aggressive.
Okay.
What we did was elected a criminal last night. And the people seem to not realize that in addition to the cases that are now pending, he has been given a mandate. I know that the House is currently still out. I have not seen the latest information on that, but the Senate, he has the Senate, he has the Supreme Court, he has the executive branch. The only thing he's waiting for is the House of Representatives, which will allow him essentially full supreme control of this nation. And for the United States of America to take the position of electing a criminal to give that much control and power to me, signals dictatorship. And regardless, whatever agendas, and we can discuss those, what some theories may be about what may be about to happen, even with the 4 cases he's got pending, all but one really stand a chance of surviving, and that's our case with the state attorney Fannie Willis in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
The other
Right.
3 cases, more than likely, he'll be able to resolve on his own by the stroke of his own pen. And I think as a nation, the thinking through our personal situations, our personal finances overshadowed that of what's best for the nation. And when you look at the forefathers who essentially wrote the Constitution and what it took for the United States to get to the point of where it is today, this part wasn't considered. Nobody predicted something like this to actually happen. I do believe that a tremendous learning lesson is going to take place as it relates to what happened yesterday and what's going to happen moving forward. I think the next at least 2 years, for example, will be chaos. Even right now, there's an email circulating where Senator Schumer from New York is pledging or allowing individuals to sign a petition that will block his immunity. But even if you achieve something like that, that would only impact the situation as it relates to New York. It won't impact anything else, including, because what we didn't mention, Judge, is there's several pending charges that he was being investigated for, and he's already indicated that several investigators, several judges, several U.S. attorneys will be fired, removed from their position, which, and you can articulate this better than I can, Judge, but they were sworn to these positions, given a duty. Even one of the judicial members who is handling his case was his appointee from his last administration. Right. So, you know, to get to this point is just a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty, and I'm just not sure where we're headed as a nation.
Well, you know, like you say, we have a tremendous amount of drama that's pending. I think today was a day of shock for many Americans. But what was amazing, I think, to me, is the number of states that he won. And as he was continuing to bring it on, it was just like I couldn't help but just shake my head. I know that I've encountered quite a few people today who were so shocked by everything that they could only begin to talk about, you know, what's next, what happened. Obviously, from all indications, Vice President Harris ran a very tight and a very awesome campaign. But there were two things that sort of belie our conversation about this, and that is, one, even though she had stars like and influencers such as Oprah, such as Magic Johnson, a host of Hollywood and music stars, Beyoncé, I mean, you name it, throughout the entire country. And you had a number of, I remember that first week after she had gotten endorsed by President Biden, there was a group that started off Win with Black Women, a national organization that's been around for about 4 or 5 years. They started it, and they ended up doing something like, I believe it was like, they raised about $1 million the first night. Then it went to Win with Black Men. And similarly, Roland Martin was the person that led that group. And we raised a great share of money. I think it was maybe almost $2 million. And then went from that to Win with White Women. And they raised, I believe, something like $7 or $8 million. And then, of course, not to be outdone, there was a group called White Dudes for Kamala. And it was a significant amount of money they raised. I think they probably topped the list in terms of what the contributions were during that first phase. And, you know, then people started coming out and announcing their support. I mean, people from folks like Liz Cheney on the one hand and Arnold Schwarzenegger on the other. And I remember an interesting comment from Schwarzenegger when he said that he was an American before he was a Republican. And he was, of course, the former governor of California. And all of these people were, you know, it appeared to me that we could have been looking at a landslide. And particularly when we compared the things that Trump was saying and his disdain for different people, different groups, from the initial disdain for Mexicans and immigrants coming across the border. He talked about them. He talked about the Haitians. He talked about the S-hole countries. He talked about the LGBTQ people. He talked about, even more recently, he talked about, allowed this comedian that was on his program at Madison Square Garden to talk about the Puerto Ricans and the Haitians. I mean, it wasn't any groups that were left out, you know, except when we think about it, those who were the white Christian nationalists, who seemed to have been the big group that embraced him and that were able to, of course, help give him victory in these multiple places. But what's irony to me, and you and I both attend church and know the principles of the Baptist Church and all the things that we're supposed to do, all the things we're supposed to live. But unfortunately, he seems to be completely contrary to everything that the church promotes. But yet these were the people who pushed him over the finish line.
I agree. I think the biggest challenge with most of this is you look at the groups you mentioned in regards to their engagement politically. What we are currently going through now as it relates to the data is that we're finding that the voter turnout rate was sufficient. It wasn't what we've dealt with in previous elections where we've suffered from defeat. This was a situation where individuals showed out in large numbers. I believe we're somewhere at the number of 140 or 150 million Americans actually did cast their vote. However, I think there was a underlining current where people felt a particular way and never shared it publicly and didn't share it from a polls or survey perspective. And as a result, even though these vehicles were put in place, we still were not able to generate the support that we needed to be able to secure a victory. And as a result, a lot of this now has funneled into the end result. And, even with the celebrities, and, they mentioned something surrounding the Taylor Swift effect on the election and how her voters and like you mentioned, the Beyoncé effect. The challenge with that was that although they were engaged to actually go out and execute their vote, what they were not educated on or at least prepared for was who to vote for and why they should vote for these individuals. And a lot of the conversations that I've been having with individuals is more so centered around their own personal needs and values that overshadowed that of what we needed to do as a group or people. And I think that even from the Harris campaign, there was not a motivation of what we need to do collectively as opposed to what you do as individuals. And one other piece to this, Judge, is I feel, and I for me personally, I can't speak for others, but I don't blame Kamala Harris for the results of last night. I think she ran a phenomenal campaign given the circumstance and situation. There are three individuals I do blame for this. And one is, number one, the Democratic Party. I feel that the Democratic Party knew what we were up against. We've been well prepared for this. They've been informative about this. They've had information in regards to what this looked like moving forward and should have been better prepared. Two, I definitely blame President Biden. President Biden should have stepped out of the race or stepped out of this situation a couple years prior to this to give her an opportunity to become a better, more formidable candidate. And then third, and you may not agree with me on this, Judge, but I blame former President Obama because he could have had much more of an impact at a much earlier start. When he entered this race, he energized black males, he energized Latinos, and he also energized white conservative-leaning Democrats who were able to come back over to the Democratic side. We just didn't have enough time. He should have done this more so in advance to allow us an opportunity to be more successful. And as a result, here are the results that we have. And even if you look at the individuals who were able to cast their ballots yesterday, a lot of these individuals were not successful in knowing why they should vote for a particular individual. So if we're going to blame anybody, that's my take. Now, as a nation, what we have to prepare for moving forward is how we get through the particular situation that we have before us, which quite frankly, I don't think anyone knows, but we have to be careful. China, Russia, North Korea, South Korea, India are all watching how we navigate this process. And even as it relates to wars and competition and global democracy, I think everybody's looking at this process to determine how even they're going to move forward. And make no mistake, moving forward, we will not be able to operate the way we have before. I'm concerned that three very pieces of America's fabric are up for grabs. One being that of diversity, inclusion, minorities. Two being that of immigration, foreign relationships, and global democracy. Three being the most important, the United States Constitution, which has never been up for grabs, but right now, based on how things are panning out, I believe it is also up for grabs.
You know, we talk about that, and we talk about educating people into the process of voting. You know, I unfortunately had encountered a couple young people who said that they didn't vote. They didn't see the importance of voting. One said it was even it wasn't high on their priority list. The other one said to the effect that she had never done anything for him. And what I find to be interesting is that this goes back again to the whole educational process, because there are a lot of people who, and I saw the data today that they were saying at one point that black men were coming out for Trump. Well, it turns out the numbers were 92% of black women voted for Vice President Harris. The second largest group were black men, who came in at something like 78% of black men that voted for Vice President Harris. So those were knocked down. I think we also heard that many of the Latino voters went for Trump. I believe something like 60% of Latino men went for Trump, and I think the number for Latino women was something like 30 or 40%. And of course, those numbers are still being calculated. But I was amazed because these were people that this man spent an enormous amount of time denigrating. As we talked about what they said at his Madison Square Garden retreat, when he made statements about or should I say the comedian that preceded him, he made statements about Puerto Ricans as a country, the island of Puerto Rico was indeed an island of trash in the Atlantic Ocean. And I know that a lot of folks who are Puerto Rican were very offended by that. And though they were initially Trump supporters, that changed. But nevertheless, there was still a significant number who didn't change, but instead continued to vote for him under the guise that he was going to be good for the economy, their economy. And which also troubles me, because this is the same man that literally destroyed the economy that Biden and Harris had to start rebuilding, particularly in light of the pandemic. And so this goes back to the Trump effect. He told so many lies, and I think it's been well documented in his first term in office. Over 30,000 lies were told. During the course of this campaign, he continued to do the same thing. And yet people weren't fact-checking. They weren't researching it, but they were indeed just swept off their feet. And many of these were church folks who they went along with them because they said they were against abortion. They were against some of the LGBTQ issues. All of these were what they call their lightning rods. But these lightning rods not only benefited Trump, but the question becomes, next level of questioning is, does he actually seek to implement Project 2025? And we know that, having read that, the 900-page document, we know that it was indeed a clarion call, because he said he was going to get rid of, deport the largest number of people, immigrants as he called them, and that's going to really have a big effect on this country, because you remember him saying that they these people were coming to America illegally, and they were taking black jobs. And of course, I think in his mind, black jobs are those things that working in the fields. And as I've said many times, I will not go back into anybody's fields. That ain't where my interests or my work. When I was a kid, a teenager, I did that, but it was for earned money, not this type of stuff that what he's talking about. But nevertheless, so many people are voting against their own self-interest, believing that, as I heard on one CBS show, there were a number of Latino voters who were on board with his idea of deporting people, and particularly because they felt like they had come into the country in a legal fashion, and they wanted people who were did not come in that fashion to be deported, not realizing that when they start deporting, they're not going to spend time worrying about, who, what, and where. I believe they would just grab up a whole bunch of people that they, quote unquote, look like they're, immigrants. And we don't ever know where that's going to take us.
And to that point, Judge, I think you hit a few points, and I'm going to try to circle back to those. One is in regards to that of the impact of this election. And there are many impacts that are going to impact us directly. And typically when you see a federal election, a lot of times people always say, or at least I've always encouraged people to realize that from a federal election standpoint, it's got a minimal effect on you as opposed to that of the local races. The local races are most important for everyday Americans. But in this particular case, there's some items that we need to pay close attention to because he's already verbally, publicly announced that he's going to address. Number one, being that of getting rid of the Department of Education. I want Americans to sit back and think about what that means. Now, no, that does not mean your child won't be able to attend public school. They will, but at that point, many of the governors throughout the nation will determine and dictate how your child would be educated. And even for us here in the state of Florida, that could be catastrophic. And then number two, the theory that lowering taxes, turning things into tariffs is going to be beneficial. First of all, if you charge foreign nations for sending goods to the United States a tariff tax, they're going to pass that tax on to consumers. So, for example, if we get a banana from Mexico, which is one of the countries he mentions, if we get a banana from Mexico for $1 right now, if he adds tariffs, which makes it $1.25, when they send it here, make no mistake, that 25 cents is going to go on to what you pay for that banana.
Right.
It's not going to cost that country anymore. They're going to pass the cost on to us. The biggest commodity that they're referring to is fuel. But then in addition to that, I think the third thing, as you highlighted, that of deportation. And a lot of people don't realize what deportation means. Deportation doesn't necessarily mean they're going to ship you out of the country somewhere else. They could very well build 2,000 new prisons or essentially deportation hubs or whatever you want to call them at that point. And these people can be housed right here in the United States, but maintained to do free labor, free work, while under the phrase of, and I put the quotations with my fingers up, being deported. So looking at these things and even as it relates to taxes, people say, well, I made more money under Trump. You didn't make more money under the last Trump administration. You benefited from two very important factors. One is that of COVID, which allowed Congress to open the purse or pocketbook at that point and distribute a significant amount of resources, which was unprecedented. But number two, the other biggest factor of it was also looking at if you say he's going to lower taxes, someone's got to pay for it long term. Borrowing more debt, acquiring more money is not the solution. And saying that we're going to lower taxes prevents us from being able to pay and address those debt issues. And even from an accounting perspective, as I indicated earlier, I own an accounting firm. Many of my clients come to me and they say to me, how is this going to affect me? What is my tax rate going to be? One of the things Trump indicated was that he would lower business or corporate tax rates from 21% right now to 15%. Well, let's talk about that 6%. That 6% right now equates to roughly $21 billion. So if you're going to take that $21 billion from the multi-million and billion-dollar corporations in America right now, where do you get it from? I'll tell you where you're going to get it from. You're going to get it from everyday working families who essentially are paying a smaller amount now. In fact, they'll be paying double or triple the tax rate that they're paying. Now, I understand that he's indicated that he's going to remove the I'm having a brain freeze like you, Judge. I've been hanging around you too long. But he's the tip tax. So right now, many of our bartenders, many of our individuals that work at restaurants that make tips, that's taxed. He's going to remove that. But if you think about that, that's a small margin compared to the vast majority of Americans that are working every day. In addition to that, he's going to look at some of the capital gains taxes. Well, he's only doing that because his friends are the ones that are coming in and buying these significant property purchases and receiving tax breaks for those purchases at astronomical rates. So, those are just some examples of the tax rates. One thing about taxes, there's a reason that those numbers are in place. And when you take those numbers out of place, somebody's got to put those numbers back to where they are.
Yeah, I mean, that is amazing and because of your experience as a accountant, you have a very great insight into how this is going to affect everyday people's pocketbooks. What's interesting is how so many people did not seem to understand what the whole tariff thing was all about. And he sold it as an idea that the other countries were going to pay for the tariffs. And, but there are a number of, economists who have stated that it's going to cost the average American approximately $4,000 a year. If you already have a hard time making it, if you already have problems with housing costs, with food costs, and all of these things, if you've already got those things, $4,000 more will only make your life more miserable. But yet he sold it to people who would themselves don't really understand that the tariff is we only can control what happens to cost on this side of the ocean, or on products that are being brought in. Because once those things are sold from the other side, then they add a tariff or add a tax to it, which is really what it is. It's an economic tax. And you end up in deeper debt. Certainly you end up with more happening to us than what has been predicted. So he's played some interesting cards. Now, let's go back to you mentioned about the education department, and that he's talking about he's going to abolish that. And again, I want to encourage our listeners to Google Project 2025. You'll find that there are a number of not only the what we call the summaries, but again, if you got the time, it's 900 pages. And I think it behooves us to educate ourselves about this whole process, because in addition to what he's talking about firing about something like 50,000 federal government employees and replacing them with his people that are loyalists. And we know that as many of the folks who work for him during his first term, they have said that this man is ill-equipped to be able to handle this whole arena. They said that he can't be trusted. They said that he's got some mental health issues going on, that he's unscripted, and certainly we've seen him not be able to carry out a full thought. He's seeking to, he gets started on one thing and he ends up in another direction. For example, he started his last message on Monday night up in Wisconsin. He was talking about Vice President Harris, calling her all kind of names and the like. But then he switched gears midstream and started talking about Nancy Pelosi. And Nancy Pelosi is not running for president, but he talked about her being evil and mean, and even said the B word about her. And look at what he said to threaten Liz Cheney, that if she needed to be set before a firing squad. All of these are very dangerous acts and events. And there are people out there that, they think his stuff he says is funny. But when you begin to look at how this whole country could end up falling apart, because as Russia has often said, they pushing an agenda that will cause Americans to turn on each other. And there was a lot of stuff on TikTok, a lot of stuff on other social media that was actually that they know already came from Russia. And, even to the point of there being, there was some bomb threats that took place on Election Day, and they've traced it already back to Russian interests. So, man, we still got a lot of work to do. And, I'm concerned that we're going to be in a position where not only talking about kicking all these people out of the country, but you ended up destroying the infrastructure of this country if you're going to get rid of that many people who are working in the federal government. Things like climate control, and we know here in Florida, we just came out of some bad hurricanes, and they're talking about destroying FEMA. So all of this stuff is just horrendous, and this is a guy that's going to lead that. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
Well, and not only when we talk about the Department of Education, just to be transparent, the entities or government entities that he's indicated he wants to dissolve are Department of Education, Internal Revenue Service, FEMA. In addition to that, he wants to bring in Elon Musk to create a new entity that will be more so centered around, and you have to be careful with the wording. I can't remember the exact term he mentioned, but it would be something along the lines of governing all the other government entities that we currently have. And what this is an offshoot president who primarily will oversee all the different facets of government and how they operate within the executive branch. And, Americans should be terrified. And when you look at what this means for us as a people moving forward, and I said to myself, and I'm going to be very transparent with you, Judge, because I look at you as a father figure. But yesterday, I felt that today was going to be the outcome. And I told myself I was going to step away and just kind of let them deal with it. Everything they want, everything they need, they can get it from this entity. But the reality is we can't do that. And I appreciate candidate Harris for coming forward and saying today that this is an opportunity now to roll up your sleeves, get even more engaged and do what you need to do. Because quite frankly, we have a fight before us. And it's a fight not only for just us as individuals, us as a community, us as a people. It's a fight for our democracy and what we've known to live by over the last several decades or hundreds of years. And when you look at what's being brought to the table, and I don't necessarily blame Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been very consistent. He's shown us who he was from day one. We as American people have failed to identify that this is a problem and fix it. And as a result, these now voters, because he's picked up what we identified was the blue wall. He identified with those blue wall individuals and picked up all 3 states. So he now is surging more in the polls. And quite frankly, had he and Obama run against each other this election cycle, he would have beat President Obama. So we have a serious problem before us, and no one knows how to fix it the day after the election, but prayerfully, because I think that's the only thing that's going to get us through this is prayer. Prayerfully, over the next year or so, we should be able to identify and see that this is not what we need, and we need to go back to where we were. And for the first time since this whole campaign about Make America Great Again has started, Make America Great Again is within the last 4 years, not 50 years.
Yeah, he ran on that theme. In fact, I would probably take it back just maybe 4 more years on top of that 2016 when he came down those golden stairs. And next thing you know, he was talking about making America great again. And he has continued that theme. You know, the guy that was one of his mentors, and I'm trying to remember the lawyer's name, but he told him years ago that if you want somebody to...
Is it Cohen, Michael Cohen?
Yeah, no. Cohen was his a younger version, but no, I'm trying to think of the guy's name that taught him that, you whatever you believe, whatever you say, just keep saying it, whether it's true or not. Eventually, people will buy it, and that's what he has done. He has kept this thing going the entirety of the time, so that people will and have been able to, say, oh well, Mr. Trump was, they did him wrong, and the election was stolen from him, and to have these people who know that some 60 cases were filed with the various courts, and not one of them did they find any evidence that that the election was stolen from him. But he kept saying it, and obviously, based upon the results last night, there was a significant number of people that believed it. They actually thought he was being victimized by the government, and he called the government so. What we say, that they're horrible, they're threatening, they're mistreating me, and he kept saying it day in, day out, until people believed it. And I believe that that's a big part of this whole process that not only compelled him into victory, but it also did the same thing for some of the other people that were running down ballots. I know our time is getting short, but as we talk about this, let's not only are we talking about Trump, but we talk about people, but then there's a certain layer of isms that affected this campaign. And I say that because we have a gender or sexism coupled with racism, and even to otherism, as I will call it, where people really they say, oh, she's not like us. And that was another thing that was promoted by he and his running mate. And of course, we see that Hillary was unable to win back in 2016 against him because there were people who did not like the idea of a woman being president, and he exploited that idea. And now there were those, many of whom initially gave the impression that they were going to support her, but then it's, we can see subconsciously that they said, can't have a woman leading the country. And so a lot of men rejected her for that purpose. But then there were those who rejected her on the fact that she was a black woman. So she was fighting it from all different sides, even though there was massive turnouts at these rallies, but there were those who did not see her as quote unquote one of them.
And quite frankly, Judge, I believe that is the primary reason why we are where we are today. She was definitely the better candidate. She was more educated. She's much more prepared. She's doing the job right now. Had this been a white male, we would not be having this conversation. I think the reality is we need to have a conversation about what we really expect from each demographic and also what we expect from each other. And I just believe that we are in a position right now where the electorate is in trouble across the country, and the communities are in trouble. When you look at everything we have to do, when you look at the hurdles we got to overcome, it's just, it seems almost like it's insurmountable. But, I think we're going to learn a very hard lesson over the next 4 years. And regardless what the income is, I believe that whether we shift left, whether we shift right, we're going to wind up back in the center. I'm optimistic about that.
Yeah. I think that we're going to see that happen. A lot of people, a lot of relationships were busted up. Friendships that existed prior to this whole election were put on hold. Conversations were not as, let's put it this way, folks were not as kind as they used to be towards one another. So we got some, as we might say, some kissing and making up. But at the same time, how do you get to that point when we've had so many, I would almost call them boulders, driven in between those relationships, oftentimes because people listen to this man. And like I said earlier, there was people that were that attended church together, but they just believed, and they were suckered into believing that this man was who he said he was. But the reality of it is that we know he was not. So, any final comments, man, as we get ready to wrap up tonight? I've really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully those out there will be able to not only listen to us live tonight, but they'll be this will be posted in the next 24 hours or so as a podcast, and hopefully they'll be able to share it with some of their friends, their family members, and hopefully stimulate conversations. I mean, we got Thanksgiving coming up. Coming up soon. And we know a lot of people going to be visiting, a lot of people going to be talking, and how do we rebuild all the damage and repair the damage that was already that's already been done? So, give us your final thoughts.
Well, Judge, I definitely appreciate the opportunity. Anytime, as I mentioned earlier, to have a conversation with you is always fruitful. It's always productive, and it's always educating. So I'm definitely privileged to be with you at this moment. And I would just encourage your listeners to, 1, think within themselves, 2, think about their communities, and 3, think about the country that we live in. And regardless, whatever your thoughts were 2 days ago, your thoughts need to be now moving forward. How do we defend what we have, and how do we not only defend it, but how do we improve it? And I know a lot of people right now are upset. A lot of people have a various range of emotions, but most importantly, I would ask you to lean to your source of guidance, your source of direction. But most importantly, I ask everyone to try to step back and just think about what it is you've done to contribute to this political process, this civic engagement. And for those who did not engage at all, I ask you to think to yourself why, and what could you have done to make a better part or be a part of this, but also to those individuals who did contribute and for whatever direction you decided. Think about it, educate yourself, be a part of it, continue to be a part of it, defend your position. Make sure that people know why you stand where you stand, and if you feel that someone has encouraged you to do something different, try to understand why that is. But outside of that, Judge, I appreciate the opportunity, and always good to talk to you, and, as I always call you and lean on you for guidance, I'll continue to do that, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate you, Judge, being on this show, being in the space you are. You've accumulated millions of dollars over the years, and you've accumulated a level of success that I would like to achieve one day. So I appreciate the opportunity to just hear from you, speak to you, and in the words of Miss Grimes, do what I got to do to help somebody else. So I'm encouraged to do that.
All right. All right. So much appreciated. And again, let's pass this on to some of the other people. Hopefully it will generate a discussion and help us all to kind of keep our focus so that we can, of course, preserve our country. And with that being said, we'll call it a night. So again, thank you. You've been listening to the Judge Hubert Radio Hour, and you've been listening to my guests and the dialogue that we have going on with Mr. Mario Davis. So until next time, stay strong, and always remember that education is the key to being and staying free. And in the words again of Dr. Carter, never go to bed as ignorant as you were when you got up this morning. Every day, you ought to learn something new. God bless all of you. Until the next time. Good night.